Welcome the anointed ones. When wolves can't touch the prey, they start biting each other. That's not just a saying, it's a reality backed by history and human nature. Every corrupt empire, every shady alliance, every group bound by a dark agenda eventually collapses from the inside. Why? Because the moment their target survives, their unity dissolves. Studies in psychology even show that alliances built on hate or envy, rather than love or purpose, are the weakest bonds of all. And right now, that's exactly what's happening in your story. The very people who joined forces against you are now turning claws and daggers on each other. Think about it. They've been scheming, whispering, plotting, and preying on your downfall like a full-time job with no salary. But here's the punchline. Heaven closed the door, locked it, and threw away the key. Every plan they tried to push through boomeranged right back in their faces. And since they can't touch you, the only thing left for them to touch is each other. Irony at its finest. This isn't just karma, this is divine strategy. Heaven didn't just protect you, it cornered them into exposing themselves. Every time you stand untouched, it's like a mirror reflecting back their own failure. And trust me, failure has a way of breeding suspicion. Now their unity is cracking like glass under pressure. One's accusing the other of being sloppy, another's blaming someone for talking too much. Suddenly, that perfect circle they drew to trap you has turned into a cage they can't escape. So buckle up, because in this message we're not just talking about enemies. We're talking about the collapse of alliances that were never real in the first place. You're going to see why their laughter turned into arguments, why their whispers turned into shouting matches, and why the very thing they built to destroy you is the same thing heaven is now using to destroy them. And let's be honest, watching people who once plotted your downfall now plotting against each other, that's not just justice. That's comedy gold. Number one, their unity was built on a common enemy, not genuine loyalty. Their unity was never real. It was just a fragile alliance glued together by one thing, their shared hatred of you. People like that don't actually like each other as much as they claim. They simply needed a common enemy to keep their bond alive. You were the glue, the distraction, the excuse for them to tolerate each other. The moment heaven blocked their attacks and left them powerless against you, the glue dissolved, and what's left is the raw truth. They were never truly united, just temporarily aligned. That's the secret about alliances built on negativity. They cannot survive long-term. Hatred might bring people to the same table, but it can't keep them there when the food runs out. The only thing they had in common was the thrill of thinking they could bring you down. Now that thrill is gone, and so is their false sense of loyalty. All that remains is their true nature, jealousy, envy, mistrust, and ego. They once hid those flaws by pointing at you, but since heaven won't allow them to touch you, they're forced to turn those same weapons on one another. This is why their downfall is inevitable. Without a target, people who feed on destruction will consume themselves. They will start to nitpick, accuse, and second-guess each other because the energy that once kept them moving forward has nowhere else to go. They're discovering that their so-called bond was only a cover-up for their own insecurities. You being untouchable forces them to see each other for who they really are. And the truth is, they were enemies to each other long before they tried to be enemies to you. What makes it even more devastating is that their attempt to unite against you only delayed the fight that was always coming between them. By shielding you, heaven sped up their collapse. The protection over your life acted like a mirror reflecting back their weakness, and since they can't handle that reflection, they attack each other instead. They thought they were strong because they had numbers, but what they really had was borrowed time. Numbers without loyalty is just noise, and noise eventually dies out. The fact that they're now devouring each other is proof that their unity was never genuine. It wasn't love, it wasn't respect, it wasn't loyalty, it was desperation. And desperation has no power once the target survives. Number two, their shadows are fighting for the throne of evil. Every dark alliance has a secret throne, even if no one admits it. The whole time they were plotting against you, there was always someone in the group who wanted to be seen as the leader, the mastermind, the one pulling all the strings. As long as they were united against you, that power struggle stayed quiet, hidden under the surface. But now that they can't touch you, their focus has shifted. Instead of aiming all their energy at you, they're turning their eyes on each other, each one fighting to prove they're the one in charge. This is the thing about evil. It's never satisfied. People who come together for wickedness don't just want the plan to succeed, they also want credit for it. They want the recognition, the applause, the feeling of superiority. But since their schemes against you keep falling flat, they have no victory to point at. And when there's no victory, the hunger for dominance turns inward. Suddenly, the alliance becomes a competition, and everyone is scrambling for a crown that doesn't even exist. What you're watching is pride colliding with pride. Their egos won't allow them to admit defeat, so instead they start accusing each other. One says, "It was your fault the plan failed." Another insists, "You didn't do your part." Someone else tries to seize control of the narrative just to look stronger than the rest. What used to be a group effort now looks like a battlefield, where each one is trying to outshine the other. And because none of them are humble enough to back down, the fight never ends. The irony is that they once thought they were powerful because they were united. But the truth is, their unity was only possible as long as you were their target. Now that heaven has made you untouchable, their egos have nothing to hide behind. All the envy, all the jealousy, all the rivalry they kept suppressed is spilling out into the open. They can't stand to see each other as equals because in their minds, one of them must always be greater, smarter, or more cunning. So their shadows are now clashing for dominance. Each of them wants the invisible throne of evil, but none of them are fit to sit on it. And the result is chaos, infighting, betrayal, and division that makes them weaker by the day. They set out to dethrone you, but all they did was expose the war inside themselves. Number 3, protection exposed their powerlessness. Your protection didn't just save you, it humiliated them. There's nothing more crushing to people who thrive on control than watching every one of their carefully crafted attacks collapse in real time. They thought they had the upper hand. They thought their strategies were foolproof. But when heaven blocked every single one of their moves, the message was loud and clear. They are powerless, and powerlessness is the one thing they can't stand to face. This is where the shift happens. People who are used to bullying or manipulating others only feel strong when their efforts succeed. The moment they meet resistance they cannot break, their confidence cracks. That crack becomes a wound, and that wound turns into rage, not at themselves for being wrong, but at each other for messing up. Instead of accepting that they're powerless against you, they start pointing fingers, accusing and tearing one another down to avoid facing the embarrassment of failure. The irony is that what was supposed to unite them, bringing you down, has now exposed how fragile they really are. They didn't come together out of love, respect, or loyalty. They came together out of greed, envy, and spite, and those foundations don't hold when plans fail. So the humiliation of being unable to touch you isn't just personal, it's contagious. Every person in that circle now feels the weight of being useless, and that weight breeds suspicion. If the plan didn't work, then someone must have talked too much. If nothing's working, then maybe one of them is sabotaging the rest. The failure becomes fuel for paranoia. And once paranoia enters, the group begins to collapse from the inside. The very shield that protected you has now become the dividing line between them. You stood untouched, and that untouched state reminds them daily that they are not as powerful as they pretended to be. What they thought was dominance has been revealed as impotence. What they believed was cleverness has been exposed as foolishness. And nothing bruises pride more than being reminded again and again that you couldn't be touched. So their protection of you wasn't just safety. It was divine humiliation for them. It forced them to confront the truth they never wanted to face. They are powerless, and when predators taste failure, they stop hunting together and start devouring each other. Number 4, their mask of unity was never real. Their mask of unity was nothing more than a performance, and like every performance, it had to end once the spotlight of truth hit the stage. They paraded themselves as family, as friends, as a strong, unshakable team, but beneath the surface it was always fragile. Their bond was rehearsed, their laughter was scripted, and their loyalty was as thin as paper. They weren't bound together by love or trust. They were bound together by pretense. The moment heaven refused to let you fall, that stage collapsed, and the actors were forced to reveal who they really are. The reality is, people who need to act unified are rarely unified. True bonds don't require performance. They don't need constant proving, nor do they need an enemy to give them purpose. What held them together wasn't authentic connection, but shared deceit. They only stood side by side because it was convenient, because the illusion of unity made them feel stronger than they truly were. When heaven stepped in and blocked their schemes, the illusion shattered. Suddenly the costumes came off, and the audience, everyone watching, could see the cracks they had worked so hard to cover. What's even more revealing is how quickly the act fell apart once they failed. A real family or real friends can endure setbacks and losses, but an alliance built on lies has no resilience. The first storm destroys it, and that's exactly what's happening. The refusal of heaven to let their scheme succeed exposed that there was no real foundation beneath them. Their smiles were painted on, their words of loyalty were empty rehearsals, their unity was a rented stage they never truly owned. Now, stripped of the act, they don't even recognize each other. Suspicion replaces closeness, irritation replaces laughter, and betrayal replaces trust. The very thing they pretended to be, a team, has been revealed as the opposite. Their performance worked only when you looked like an easy target, but once heaven made you untouchable, the audience could see the truth. The actors were stumbling, the stage was breaking, and the play was over. Their mask of unity didn't just slip, it shattered. And once a mask is broken, it can never be worn the same way again. Number 5. They mistook heaven's silence for permission. They completely misunderstood heaven's silence. When you didn't react, when you didn't fight back, when you didn't expose them immediately, they took that stillness as a green light. They assumed that because nothing struck them down in the moment, their actions were being overlooked or even tolerated. In their arrogance, they mistook patience for weakness and silence for permission. But heaven was never giving them approval. It was simply watching, recording, and letting them dig their own graves. That's the thing about divine justice. It doesn't rush. It allows time for people to reveal exactly who they are. And in that silence, they became bolder, more reckless, and more convinced that they were untouchable. Every time you chose not to retaliate, they mistook it as proof that they were winning. But what they couldn't see was that heaven was taking notes. What they couldn't understand was that the delay wasn't absence, it was surveillance. When their plans kept collapsing, when every scheme backfired, it finally started to dawn on them that the silence was never in their favor. Instead, it was the rope they were given to hang themselves. The more they acted, the deeper they dug. And when the results never matched their expectations, paranoia set in. Now, instead of enjoying their so-called victories, they're looking over their shoulders, questioning each other, and wondering who's leaking information or sabotaging the group. They can't accept that the real reason for their failure isn't betrayal within, it's protection above. But pride won't let them see it that way, so they keep accusing, pointing fingers, and tearing one another apart. Each new failure drives them further into suspicion because they can't grasp that heaven itself has placed a barrier they can't break. Their minds twist the truth into lies, convincing them someone on the inside must be working against them. And that's where the collapse begins. By mistaking silence for permission, they set themselves up for their own downfall. Now the same silence that once emboldened them has become their torment. They can't sleep peacefully, they can't trust one another, and they can't escape the paranoia that grows with every failed plan. What they thought was freedom was actually surveillance, and what they thought was victory was nothing but the sound of heaven setting them up for judgment. Number 6. Fear is more contagious than loyalty. Fear spreads faster than anything else, and once it enters a group, it doesn't take long before the whole foundation crumbles. At first, they moved with confidence, fueled by the belief that their unity gave them strength. As long as their schemes appeared to work, they felt untouchable. But the moment heaven began blocking their plans, that confidence was stripped away, leaving fear in its place. And fear is far more contagious than loyalty ever will be. Loyalty requires trust, sacrifice, and belief in something greater than oneself. Fear, on the other hand, requires nothing but self-preservation. The second failure appeared. Each person in that circle started thinking less about the group and more about their own survival. They began asking questions they wouldn't dare say aloud. What if I'm next? What if they throw me under the bus? What if someone exposes me first? Those quiet thoughts multiplied in every mind, spread panic like wildfire. The irony is that the very thing they mocked you for, your dependence on heaven, is the very thing now haunting them. Because they see that something bigger than them is blocking their moves. And deep down, they know there's no strategy clever enough to beat divine order. That realization doesn't inspire them to unite stronger. It divides them. Fear makes them selfish. It makes them look at each other not as allies, but as potential threats. And once fear takes hold, loyalty becomes fragile. What was once a united front starts to look more like a collection of individuals desperately trying to avoid exposure. Every failed plan feels like someone's fault. Every mistake looks like sabotage. And every whispered rumor becomes a reason to turn on one another. Instead of asking how to succeed, their minds obsess over who will be the next to fall. This is why their circle cannot last. Loyalty is too weak to survive repeated failure, but fear thrives in it. And since fear spreads faster than any vow of allegiance, it only takes one or two to panic before the whole group is poisoned. Now the chain that once held them together is broken link by link, not because of an outside enemy, but because fear has convinced each of them that the real enemy might be sitting right beside them. Number 7. Evil has no patience when it's losing. Evil only looks organized when it's winning. As long as their schemes appear to be working, dark alliances can act patient, calculating, and disciplined. They'll wait, they'll plot, they'll pretend to play the long game. But that patience is nothing more than a mask. It's borrowed strength from the illusion of success. The moment heaven blocks their path and keeps you untouched, the mask slips. What once looked like strategy unravels into desperation, because wickedness has no endurance when it starts losing. That's the key difference between good and evil. Good can wait because it's rooted in truth, and truth doesn't expire. But evil is fueled by appetite. It wants results immediately. It doesn't know how to build, it only knows how to consume. And when the consuming stops, the hunger grows unbearable. That's when chaos erupts. Suddenly, they're no longer plotting with clarity, they're scrambling with panic. They move from careful whispers to reckless actions, from planned schemes to sloppy outbursts. Their inability to touch you forces their impatience to bleed out into the open. Impatience then turns their unity into conflict. When people only came together for wicked gain, patience is the first thing to die in the face of failure. They start blaming one another, pushing for faster results and making reckless decisions that expose their true nature. Each one feels the clock ticking, each one feels their grip slipping, and instead of working together, they start clawing for control. The harmony they faked when they thought they were winning now collapses under the weight of frustration. This is why you see their downfall happening so quickly. They don't know how to stand still and accept defeat. They don't know how to regroup with humility or wisdom. All they know is consumption, and when there's nothing left to consume, when heaven has blocked every doorway, they turn inward, feeding on one another like starving wolves. The fact that you remain untouched is more than just protection, it's exposure. It reveals that their patience was never real, only a disguise. And now that disguise has crumbled, their desperation is loud, their chaos is visible, and their downfall is unstoppable. Evil can play games, but it cannot wait. And when patience runs out, destruction begins from within. Number 8. The absence of your destruction is their constant reminder of failure. Your very survival has become their nightmare. Every single day you wake up untouched, every time you rise stronger, every moment you continue to walk under divine protection, it crushes them a little more. Because for them, your destruction wasn't just a goal, it was supposed to be proof that they were powerful. It was their way of validating their schemes, their envy, their bitterness. But since that destruction never came, every sunrise becomes another loud announcement that they failed. And failure is not something they know how to carry quietly. The longer you live untouched, the heavier that failure sits on their backs. It's not just disappointment, it's humiliation. It's a living reminder that their power, their numbers, their plotting, all added up to nothing. And the weight of that realization doesn't just sit still, it has to go somewhere. That's why they've turned on each other. Because when they can't unload their frustration on you, they unload it on whoever's standing closest. Blame becomes the new language of their conversations. Suspicion creeps into their minds like poison. Rage simmers beneath every interaction. They can't admit that heaven blocked them, because that would mean acknowledging a power higher than theirs. So instead, they twist the truth into something they can process. It must be someone else's fault. Someone didn't do their part. Someone leaked information. Someone wasn't loyal enough. Their minds can't handle the idea that you were divinely protected, so they invent human reasons for their failures. But those made-up reasons become ammunition for attacks against each other. What makes this even more tragic for them is that their failure is ongoing, not a one-time event. It repeats daily. Every morning they see you still standing, still breathing, still moving forward is another confirmation that they've lost. And because the confirmation keeps coming, the tension inside their circle keeps rising. They can't escape it. Their loss follows them into conversations, into sleep, into every new plan that's doomed to collapse before it even begins. So now, instead of celebrating your downfall, they live trapped in the constant echo of their own failure. And the louder that echo gets, the more violently they turn against each other. Your survival isn't just your victory. It's their torment, day after day, moment after moment, until they finally devour themselves. Number 9. The circle they formed became their cage. The very circle they formed with the intention of trapping you has now turned into their prison. They thought they were being clever by keeping everything hidden, swearing secrecy, and building an alliance that no outsider could penetrate. In their minds, secrecy was power. But what they didn't realize is that secrecy is also confinement. By agreeing to keep their deeds in the dark, they locked themselves inside a cage with no way out. And now, that cage is closing in on them. Every plan they made, every lie they told, every betrayal they carried out is something they cannot confess to anyone outside their circle. They can't go to family for relief. They can't turn to outsiders for help. And they can't admit the truth without exposing themselves. That silence they swore to protect has now become a trap. The only people they can argue with, accuse, or lash out at are the very same ones they once called allies. This is the danger of alliances built on evil. They demand loyalty to secrecy, but secrecy only breeds paranoia. The more their plans fail, the more suspicious they become of one another. They can't vent to anyone else, so they pour their anger into the only safe targets they have, each other. And because none of them are trustworthy, every word spoken in that circle is laced with doubt. Every conversation feels like a risk. Every agreement feels like a lie. And every glance carries the question, are you the one who's going to betray me? Instead of being a place of strength, their circle is now suffocating them. What was once their weapon has become their punishment. The same secrecy that made them bold now makes them fearful, because exposure would destroy them all. They are chained to each other by their own silence, forced to carry the burden of their evil together, but without trust or true loyalty to ease the weight. And that's the irony. They built the circle thinking it would be your cage, but heaven flipped it around. You're free, protected, moving forward, while they're trapped in a prison of their own making. They can't leave, they can't confess, they can't escape. All they can do is tear into each other until the cage they built finally collapses on them. Number 10. Heaven's blockade made their demons restless. You were meant to be their outlet, the safe target, the one they could drain, mock, and destroy without consequence. That was the role they assigned you in their twisted narrative. As long as they had access to you, they had somewhere to pour their venom, somewhere to release the weight of their own misery. But heaven stepped in and shut the door. The access they once depended on was blocked, and suddenly their demons had nowhere to go. What once flowed outward is now turning inward, and without you to feed on, they've started consuming each other. This is the truth about people who operate from darkness. They always need a host. They survive by attaching themselves to someone else's energy, peace, or light. You were that host for a time, but heaven's protection cut off the supply. And now the demons that drove them don't simply vanish. They demand release. That demand doesn't disappear, it redirects. And because they can't reach you anymore, the only place left for their demons to strike is within their own circle. That's why you're seeing them unravel so quickly. Rage doesn't just sit quietly. It looks for a body to inhabit, a mind to corrupt, a relationship to destroy. When you were the outlet, they could mask their dysfunction by pointing everything at you. But now that you're untouchable, they're forced to turn their claws inward. The resentment that was once aimed your way has become resentment toward each other. The criticism, the gossip, the betrayal, it's no longer about you. It's about who's closest to them in the moment. And here's the devastating irony. The same energy they once united to direct at you is now the very force tearing their group apart. Heaven didn't just protect you. It redirected their destruction back into their own camp. Their demons have no choice but to turn cannibal, devouring friendships, breaking bonds, and exposing just how hollow their unity always was. This is why their downfall feels so rapid. It isn't random. It's the natural consequence of heaven's blockade. They built their survival on draining others, and now that you're no longer available, their hunger is eating them alive. They thought they could feed on your soul forever, but heaven closed the buffet, and in the absence of your destruction, the only meal left is each other. Number 11. They're forced to see who they really are without you. They built their whole identity around your downfall. Everything they did, every whisper, every scheme was tied to the idea of seeing you broken. In their minds, your failure was their success, your destruction was their validation. But when heaven refused to let you fall, something devastating happened. They were left with nothing to define themselves by. And now, stripped of that illusion, they're being forced to see who they really are without you. That's the cruel truth they never prepared for. Without you as a target, they have no sense of purpose. They can't measure themselves by your struggles anymore because you're still standing. They can't feel superior by comparing themselves to your pain because you've outlasted it. And without that borrowed identity, what's left? Emptiness. Silence. A void that exposes how little substance they actually had all along. When people hate you more than they love themselves, they live on borrowed energy. Their motivation isn't built from self-growth, passion, or vision. It's built from resentment. And the danger with resentment is that it doesn't create. It only destroys. Once heaven removed their access to you, they were forced to confront the emptiness they've been running from. But instead of facing it with humility, they implode. The hate that once gave them direction now turns against them, eating them alive from the inside out. That's why their relationships are collapsing. That's why they're restless, suspicious, and chaotic. They're not just mad at you. They're mad at themselves for needing you as their definition in the first place. Your survival has revealed their lack of self. And nothing terrifies people more than having to face the mirror when they've built their life on falsehood. So now, while you walk free and whole, they are stuck wrestling with the reality they can't escape. You were never the problem. Their emptiness was always the problem. But as long as they had you to target, they could avoid that truth. Now that heaven has made you untouchable, avoidance is no longer an option. They're staring at their own hollowness, and it's breaking them apart. They thought destroying you would give them meaning, but your survival has only exposed their lack of it, and that exposure is the beginning of their implosion. Number 12. The more they plot, the more they expose themselves. The more they plot, the more naked they become. Every scheme they hatch, every whispered plan they think is secret, every calculated lie, they all boomerang right back into exposure. It's not just that their plans fail. It's that their very attempts become evidence against them. Heaven has designed it so that the act of plotting itself becomes their undoing. Instead of destroying you, their schemes are slowly destroying the image they tried so hard to protect. Whispers don't stay whispers for long. Someone always repeats them, intentionally or not, and in that repetition, cracks appear. Lies don't hold together under pressure. They contradict one another until confusion exposes the truth. Alliances built on deceit don't age well either. They fracture when everyone starts realizing just how untrustworthy the others really are. And all of this happens because heaven has blocked their intended outcome. With you untouchable, the energy of their plotting doesn't vanish. It ricochets back into their own camp, creating chaos. That's the irony they never saw coming. They thought plotting in the dark made them powerful, but the darkness is now their downfall. Each secret meeting leaves behind suspicion. Each failed plan raises new questions. Each lie that doesn't line up becomes a seed of doubt. Slowly but surely they expose themselves without you lifting a finger. Your silence isn't weakness, it's strategy from above. By not being touched, you force them into a position where they reveal their own corruption. This is the dangerous beauty of divine protection. Your enemies end up becoming their own witnesses. They do the talking, they create the evidence, and they unravel their own story. And while they scramble to figure out why nothing is working, they're really just digging deeper into exposure. Every time they regroup, another truth slips out. Every time they try again, another fracture forms in their circle. The truth is, their schemes were never sustainable. Evil doesn't know how to hold itself together when it keeps failing. So the more they try to come against you, the more heaven turns their plotting into mirrors. Mirrors that reflect every lie, every betrayal, every hidden agenda back at each other. They wanted you to be uncovered, but in the end, they're the ones stripped bare. Their exposure is not accidental, it's divine design. Number 13. They thought you were the weak link, but they were. They always believed you were the weak link. In their minds, it was impossible for one person to stand against their numbers, their whispers, and their schemes. They looked at your isolation, your silence, or even your struggles, and mistook them for weakness. They convinced themselves that all it would take was pressure from every side, and you would finally snap. But heaven flipped the script and proved them wrong. What they thought was fragility was actually strength, and what they believed was power in numbers was nothing but insecurity in disguise. The truth is, needing a crowd to attack one person is already proof of weakness. It takes no strength to hide behind numbers, no courage to fight as a mob. If you were truly weak, they wouldn't have needed each other. They wouldn't have needed to plot, gather, or strategize. The fact that they banded together to take you down revealed something they didn't want to admit. You were stronger than all of them put together, and now the proof is undeniable. You are still standing, untouched, while they are unraveling. The weak links have been revealed, and it isn't you, it's them. It's the alliances that required multiple hands just to fail. It's the friendships that only existed because of their mutual hatred for you. It's the people who claimed to be powerful but couldn't last without leaning on each other like crutches. Heaven has exposed that you were never the fragile one. They were. This is why their downfall stings so badly. They underestimated the power of one soul protected by heaven, while overestimating the strength of their alliance. They thought majority ruled. But heaven showed them that truth doesn't need numbers to stand firm. They thought you were easy prey, but the very attempt to make you their target revealed their own desperation. Now every time they look at you, they see living proof of their miscalculation. You weren't the weak link. You were the anchor, and their so-called unity wasn't strength. It was a chain of weakness waiting to snap. The alliances that once laughed at you have been exposed as fragile, temporary, and hollow. They underestimated you, but in doing so, they exposed themselves as the weakest ones of all. Number 14. Their division is the judgment you'll never have to speak. Their division is not random, it's the judgment they earned, and it came without you lifting a finger. You don't have to fight to prove yourself, you don't have to gather evidence, and you don't even have to defend your name. Heaven handled that work. The very thing they feared most, exposure, is now happening from within their own camp. Their whispers are slipping through cracks. Their accusations are being hurled at each other, and their unity has shattered into fragments. That collapse is the verdict, stamped and sealed by heaven itself. What makes it sting even more for them is that you never had to retaliate. They expected you to come at them, to try to clap back, to enter into the chaos and wrestle with their lies. Instead, you stayed still, and heaven used their own hands to bring them down. That silence they mistook for weakness has now become their greatest torment, because it forced them to face consequences without you ever having to swing back. Your absence in the battlefield is what makes the judgment so heavy. They can't even blame you. Their betrayal of each other is the evidence. Every argument, every accusation, every broken trust is heaven saying loud and clear, guilty. The punishment isn't just in being exposed to the world, it's in having to live with the fallout of turning against the very people they thought they could trust. It's in realizing that the same alliances they bragged about are now tearing them apart piece by piece. They wanted to see you judged, but judgment came for them instead, and it came in a way they can't escape, through each other. The beauty of this judgment is that it leaves you free. Free from defending your name, free from trying to convince people of your truth, free from the exhausting need to retaliate. While they unravel, you rise untouched. While they fight to survive in the ruins of their alliances, you walk in peace, knowing you never had to soil your hands. Heaven wrote the final word. Their division is the judgment, their collapse is the sentence, and their betrayal of each other is the undeniable evidence. The truth is undeniable. Heaven never just protected you, it exposed them. What was once hidden behind masks of unity, secrecy, and strength has been stripped bare, and now they're devouring one another because they can't devour you. Every scheme became their own undoing. Every silence from above was surveillance. Every attempt to break you only revealed who was really weak. They wanted your destruction to be their proof of power, but your survival became their sentence. And here's the divine irony. Your greatest defense wasn't retaliation, it was preservation. While you stood still, heaven went to war on your behalf. That's why their circle collapsed, their patience vanished, and their so-called alliances transformed into cages they can't escape. What they once used to define themselves, the plot against you, has now left them exposed, restless, paranoid, and fractured. This is not just judgment, it's the fulfillment of a higher law. No weapon formed against you shall prosper, not because the weapons won't be formed, but because they will always backfire. And in the ashes of their schemes, one truth remains. Your untouched survival is the loudest testimony of all. So stand tall, chosen one. You don't need to prove anything, you don't need to lift a finger, and you don't need to chase validation. Their collapse is the proof, their division is the judgment, and their betrayal of each other is the undeniable evidence that heaven's hand has been on you all along. You were never the weak link, they were. And now the world sees it. If this message resonated with you, make sure you join our growing community of awakened souls. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment of truth and revelation. Show your support by liking this video. It tells the universe you're ready to rise above the noise. Drop a comment below to share your experiences, your victories, and your insights, because your story could inspire someone else to stand untouchable. And don't forget to share this with anyone who needs to see that survival, strength, and divine protection are not accidents. They're destiny. Be part of this movement, and let's keep walking in truth together. God bless you.